Racism and black discrimination are not recent issues in the United States. Even going back in aviation history, the African American population was discriminated against severely. Yet, when it came to piloting biplanes, fighter jets, and spacecraft, they have made incredible impacts in the face of discrimination. Yet they were an integral part of the history of aviation. However, these amazing trailblazers have been lost in the history books. Do you want to know how these heroes carved their legacies against racism and excelled in aviation? Who was the first black fighter pilot? In the spirit of celebrating Black History Month, let's take a journey into the history books and discuss the Black Swallow of Death, America's first black fighter pilot. This story begins in the 19th century. Known as the Black Swallow of Death for his courage during missions, Eugene Bullard was the first African-American combat aviator. Born in Columbus, Georgia, on October 9, 1895, he was the seventh child of 10 to Josephine Thomas and William O. Bullard. At the time, education was not easily accessible to most Americans, let alone blacks. Eugene received a basic education where he learned to read, which was a major key to his later success. As a child, Bullard witnessed the near lynching of his father and among other racial violence. This led to his decision to run away from home in 1906 at just 11 years old. He found his way to Atlanta, where he joined a group of gypsies and traveled with them, tending and learning to race their horses. As a teen, Bullard stowed away on a German merchant ship, the Martha Roos, that was bound for Aberdeen, Scotland. In 1912, for 2 years, he performed in a vaudeville troupe and supported himself as a prize fighter in Great Britain and in other European circuits. His first appearance in Paris was at a boxing match in November of 1913. France proved to be a pivotal location for him and his career. While he was in France, World War I broke out when he was 19 years old. He decided to join the French Foreign Legion, serving the Moroccan division of the 170th Infantry Regiment. Bullard was more interested in the French air service, though. He started by training as a gunner and quickly excelled through the ranks. His goal was to be a pilot. Bullard, along with Domenico Mondelli from Italy, Ahmet Ali Çeliktin of the Ottoman Empire, and William Robinson Clark, a Jamaican who flew for the Royal Flying Corps, all flew for France. So, why do they call him the Black Swallow? His name was L'Hirondelle Noire, which in French translates to Black Swallow. Being an intelligent young man, he had excellent knowledge of the missions and warfare. He was soon awarded the Croix de Guerre and Médaille Militaire by France in 1916 for his bravery at the Battle of Verdun. Bullard piloted the SPAD S-7, or S-7, one of France's best single-seat fighters of World War I, between 1914 and 1918. He quickly became known for flying into dangerous situations. He amassed a distinguished record, flying 20 combat missions and downing at least one German plane. When he handled the warcraft, they both epitomized the quintessential dogfighter in every sense of the word, with rugged qualities and solid performance figures embodied by the aircraft's appearance during the conflict. With a great pilot like Eugene, the S-7 more or less became the first successful warplane design effort by the Société pour l'Aviation et ses Dérivés, otherwise known by the letters SPAD. When flown by Eugene, the airframes proved highly robust in the field, able to withstand significant damage and keep flying thanks to their largely wood construction. Its dive qualities were exceptional due to the strong internal structure, and Eugene tactically used this both as an offensive and defensive strategy. In addition, the S-7 selection of engine, coupled with sound engineering, helped Eugene maneuver with good cruise speeds and a useful rate of climb. Eugene could, therefore, engage enemies with a particular advantage or turn tail to live to fight another day whenever the situation required. The handling of an aircraft at low speeds required some reasonable flight experience like that of Eugene, and this helped him avoid lethal mistakes at the stick, particularly when landing. He was seriously wounded twice and was pulled out of action. He again served in World War II for France. However, he was seriously injured and escaped to Spain. He eventually made his way to New York, but he never fully recovered from his injuries. Moreover, in 1959, after much deliberation, the French government decided to name Bullard a National Chevalier, or Knight. Therefore, the following year, then French President Charles de Gaulle visited the United States and traveled to New York City to meet Bullard personally. Although Eugene Jacques Bullard died in Harlem on October 12, 1961 at 66, he was later honored posthumously by the Smithsonian Institution's National Air and Space Museum in 1994. He is buried with military honors in the French War Veterans section of Flushing Cemetery in Queens. Eugene paved the way for Ensign Jesse Leroy Brown. Another black hero, Ensign Brown, as fondly called, was the first African-American to complete flight training in the United States Navy. Tragically, he was also the first African-American naval officer killed in the Korean War. Ensign was born on October 13, 1926, in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Being one of 6 children, his father, John Brown, was a sharecropper, and his mother, Alice, was a teacher. While in high school, Jesse Brown was a 3-sport athlete at Hattiesburg's Eureka High School, where he was the salutatorian. In 1944, although he studied engineering at The Ohio State University, he still supported himself by working off-campus as a janitor and a boxcar loader. Brown had always dreamed of becoming an aviator ever since his father took him to an air show as a child. So, in 1946, he enlisted in the Naval Reserve and was admitted to the Naval Aviation Program. After many flight trainings, Brown came out as one of the selected 6 in 100 who had started the program to earn the Wings of Gold on October 28, 1948. On April 26, 1949, Ensign Brown received his commission and was initially posted to the Atlantic Fleet and assigned to Fighter Squadron VF-32, flying off the carrier USS Wright. Meanwhile, with the outbreak of war in Korea in 1950, Brown's squadron was transferred to the Pacific Fleet and the aircraft carrier USS Leyte. By the end of 1950, Brown was a squadron section leader and had participated in several actions supporting United Nations ground troops. Brown had flown one of the most significant fighter aircraft of all time, the American Vought F-4U Corsair. The aircraft became the stuff of legend for its part in the aerial wars of World War II, the Korean War, and several Cold War conflicts that followed. The F-4U continued to make a name for itself in the Pacific theater, even earning the respect of its Japanese foes as one of the most feared combat aircraft in the region. Having an engine was traditionally fitted at the front of the airframe, with single-seat cockpit located just aft. The wing mainplanes were seated ahead of midships, while the fuselage was well streamlined and tapered to the rear. The empennage consisted of a single, short, curved vertical tail fin with low-set horizontal planes. The F-4U's original armament included 4 50-caliber Browning heavy machine guns. Despite the inherent strengths of the F-4U design, the aircraft had an obstructed forward view. Due to the raised fuselage spine, the wing's location and long nose reduced Brown's rearward vision. Brown also faced difficulties in cockpit access because of the unique wing bend. Additionally, the inherent dangers of landing such a high-performance aircraft on a moving carrier deck prompted the Navy to delay shipboard use of the F-4U for the time being. Instead, the plane began operations as a land-based fighter with U.S. Marine Air Group VMF-124 over Bougainville in February of 1943. However, in practice, the F-4U made short work of the once unbeatable Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters, the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service. However, improved training and a better stock of seasoned pilots like Brown, coupled with a fast and powerful fighter, eventually helped to turn the tide of the Pacific War over time. Indeed, the F-4U proved itself the first Allied fighter to be able to counter the threat of the A6M0 in the war. Being flown by Brown, she could outturn and outdive most enemy craft in the Pacific theater. Also, the F-4U's versatility allowed Brown to use it as a ground attacker when outfitted with 8x5 aerial rockets or up to 4,000 pounds of conventional drop stores. Its jettisonable fuel tanks helped to increase overall combat ranges and bring the fight to the enemy, wherever they were found. In fact, the Japanese Army forces were reported to have grown so accustomed to F-4U Corsair strikes and their accompanying dive sound that they nicknamed the American aircraft Whistling Death. This sound was attributed to the rush of air at the cooler vents when the F-4U was in a high-speed diving action. Brown and his co-pilots managed over 500 air kills by the end of 1943 and totaled some 2,140 enemy aircraft by the end of the war in August of 1945. The highest-scoring ace of the U.S. Marine Corps became Major General Gregory "Pappy" Boyington, who managed 28 total enemy kills. All of these totals were made possible in part by the 64,000 sorties recorded by F-4U airmen throughout the war. Allied pilots eventually earned an astounding kill ratio of 11-1 against their Japanese foes. Unfortunately, on December 4, 1950, on a mission toward the chosen reservoir, a Chinese anti-aircraft fire ruptured Brown's F-4U Corsair's fuel line and forced him to crash land in a snowy mountain pasture. Brown was seriously injured and trapped in the cockpit, and he died. Afterwards, it was deemed too dangerous to retrieve Brown's body. The Navy also feared that the Corsair could come into enemy hands. Therefore, a warrior's funeral was ordered. The entire crash site was incinerated with napalm. Eugene Brown, whom the black press had lionized since becoming a Navy pilot in 1948, was posthumously awarded the Air Medal, Distinguished Flying Cross, and Purple Heart. Also, in 1973, 23 years after his death, the frigate USS Jesse L. Brown was christened in his honor. Again, on November 23, 2022, Columbia Pictures released a biopic, Devotion, based on Ensign Brown's life. The story of the Tuskegee Airmen began in January of 1941, when the U.S. War Department announced plans to send qualified black men to Alabama for pilot training at Tuskegee University. Many within the Army Air Corps did not agree with the program. Although black men had served in the U.S. military long before World War II, they were not allowed to fly airplanes. Many military leaders did not think black men were smart enough to pass, even though black pilots flew for France during World War I. The first class of black students began training at Tuskegee on July 19, 1941. Although about 12 men were trained to become military pilots, only 5 graduated on March 7, 1942. Those 5 were the first of nearly 1,000 black men in 44 classes who received fighter or bomber pilot training and graduated between 1941 and 1946 at Tuskegee. Additionally, when America entered World War II following the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, there was an urgent need to train new pilots to fly fighters and bombers in Europe. The Tuskegee pilots could help fill this need, but many military leaders did not want to use them. The training at Tuskegee was considered an experiment, and many military leaders were sure the experiment would fail. However, despite racism, the number of black military pilots trained at Tuskegee continued to grow. By August 1942, they had graduated enough to form an entire fighter squadron of 33 pilots. Fighter and bomber squadrons often had their names changed as they were moved around to different bases. The squadrons and groups in which the Tuskegee Airmen flew were the same. Eventually, all the units in which Tuskegee Airmen flew were gathered together as part of the 332nd Fighter Group. This group included the 99th, 101st, 301st, and 302nd Fighter Squadrons. Fighter squadrons were responsible for many jobs during the war, including dive-bombing bridges, shooting enemy targets on the ground, patrolling coastal areas, and escorting bombers to protect them from enemy fighter attacks. Squadrons included more than pilots. They had mechanics, cooks, doctors, nurses, and others. Most of these duties were also done by black men and women because the military kept black and white people segregated from each other. Also, Tuskegee fighter pilots primarily flew 4 different types of aircraft. These included the P-39 Airacobra, P-40 Warhawk, P-47 Thunderbolt, and P-51 Mustang. Each of these aircraft had a single propeller. The P-51 Mustang was a favorite among the Tuskegee pilots. When flying the P-51 Mustang, they painted the entire tail red. Because of this, the black pilots were known as Red Tails. The name Tuskegee Airmen did not become popular until 1955, when a history of the famous group was published in a book called The Tuskegee Airmen, the story of the Negro in the U.S. Air Force. Given how these brave black heroes fought for their nation's freedom at a time when many citizens of that nation were fighting them for being black men is iconic. Some of them were stopped from enjoying the freedoms like their white counterparts. Yet, they left a legacy not only for the African American population, but for the world. That wraps up our dive into black pilots and the Black Swallow. Leave us a comment, like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring awareness of iconic people. Thanks for watching.